Hello, I'm Roger Bisbee from the Skill Builder channel, and from time to time we bring you videos and stories about homeowners who are at their wits' end because they've bought houses, they've been let down by the developer, they've been let down by the builder or somebody else, and they're trying to get some redress. Now this is a story in a whole different league. These people who live in Ireland have bought homes which are literally crumbling around their ears.
The Donegal County Council let all these council houses be built. That's a total utter disgrace. And that's why we will demand a MICA inquiry, a public inquiry. There has to be an inquiry into this.
So in all my years of building, I've never seen anything quite as bad as that. And you might wonder what these people can do about it. You might think that there's some knight in shining armour that is coming to their rescue. But some of these people have been fighting a battle for over 10 years. And now we're going to talk to Michael Doherty, who heads up the MICA Action Group.
We have got what's referred to as deleterious materials in the concrete blocks. So what you have is, in our part of the world, Donegal, which is the most northerly county in Ireland, as part of the Republic of Ireland, but it's geographically the furthest north. It has got mica, and mica is a naturally occurring mineral in the rock that's quarried. That rock is then crushed and becomes one of the key ingredients in a concrete block, obviously in the form of the gravel, added with cement and obviously added with sand as well. But if the rock contains excessive levels of mica, what happens is that it absorbs more water and then is subject to freeze-thaw action, and the blocks actually crumble. And we have that's the science behind it. But what we have noticed on the ground is, without freeze-thaw, continuous wetting and drying cycles that we will get with our Irish weather also has a detrimental effect. And eventually, we call these Weetabix blocks, and literally that's what you've got. You can start with your hand. If the plaster, which is the hardest part, is removed with a hammer and a bolster, you can actually, with your hand, claw your way through the block, the 4-inch block, all the way through till you reach the insulation in the cavity wall. And if you want to go through that, you will also get into the inside leaf when the walls are bad enough. Now, really? what compounded the problem was that there was a grant from the Irish government for energy efficiency, and they encouraged us to pump the cavity walls with beads, insulation beads. And what that did, that actually bridged between the two walls. And what you had then was moisture. There was no drying anymore, and the inside of the blocks were wringing wet in the insulation, and that bridged across then to the inside leaves. And we've got inside leaves then crumbling as well. And what that amounts to basically is the coin stones falling off. You have got cracks around the windows. You've got cracks that you can actually put your fingers right into now the whole way through. And the more that gets wet, the more that wetting and drying cycle takes place. And eventually the blocks just fall apart. I'm sure a lot of the construction process of record in England as well, and in the rest of the UK, will be bison slabs, the concrete first floor options. And we have that, and that's putting tremendous weight forces on these blocks that are just not simply fit for purpose. So we have got what should have been like 7 Newton blocks crushing out at 2 Newton, 1 Newton, half a Newton. Some of them won't even stand the crush test because they're gravel. They'll not even stay in the shape of a block in the first place.
It's very common in Ireland to be building buildings of concrete block and rendering them over because you haven't got a huge number of brickworks out there. It's not so many brick built buildings. So these buildings have been built with concrete blocks on the inner and outer skin. And you're saying that those inner skin blocks they're maybe not aircrete blocks, but they're a concrete block, very similar, quarried from the same place as the outer skin, So they may be the same block. This mica problem, you talk about it, there's mica there and it's a critical level. So there's a percentage over which you should not go, I guess, is there?
There's a 1949 statutory instrument regulations in Ireland that states that you can't have more than 1% mica. Okay. That was being adhered to. So quarries would have stayed away from parts of the quarry that had rock that showed more than 1%. But during Celtic Tiger times, whenever things got really busy, the authorities adopted a light touch regulation approach, and really quarries got more or less asked to go do the right thing and self-regulate. From there, everything went wrong. So we are in a situation now where we have got blocks that the quarries have walked away from, the insurance companies have walked away from, and the government tried to walk away from, and we refuse to let that happen. So our lobby group has basically brought them to the table now. We had a monster demonstration down in Dublin, 15th of June, over 20,000 people. We had closer to 30,000 people in Dublin. We could effectively topple government here if they're not prepared to do the right thing by the homeowners. And that's the escalation plan we've got. So everything that I've talked about regards MICA for Donegal is true for the Western Seaboard. There's 5 affected counties along the Western Seaboard. They've got a very similar natural occurring mineral, but it's not mica. It's pyrite. Pyrite is given basically the same issue as what mica is given in Donegal in the concrete blocks. When we have tried to get what we call 100% redress, in other words, give us back our homes, not to any greater value than what they had before, but, we've already bought and paid for these homes once. We should not be in a situation where we have to do that a second time. And there's already a precedent set there in Dublin. When they had pyrite down there, granted it wasn't in the blocks, it was actually in the hardcore underneath the concrete floor slabs. And when it got wet, it started to swell and it started to rise like a cake, and the floors all bursted up. So that's still ongoing in Dublin. But the homeowners in Dublin are getting 100% redress, no questions asked. In the rural counties that I live in and the other 5 affected counties, they're not prepared to go there, and they keep haggling over what's the least deal will take. And that's where it has become extremely frustrating for us. Yeah. But, there are issues around the regulations themselves, were the regulations themselves strong enough at the time? If they weren't, we've got a National Standards Authority of Ireland. Again, it all falls onto the state. It's their responsibility. If the regulations were good enough, but simply not enforced because of Celtic Tiger and greed at the time, then that again was light touch regulation introduced by the state. So either way, the buck stops with the state as far as we're concerned.
What's it going to be in terms of the payout in the end? I know it's hard to say because obviously each building has got to be demolished and rebuilt, I guess, hasn't it? And those people have got to be housed somewhere else. I mean, I guess a lot of people have had to be housed somewhere else anyway, haven't they? Because they can't live in these homes. I mean, I've seen some of the pictures. They're pretty horrendous.
Well, we've got families at the minute with acro props. And anybody in the building trade will know what acro props are. That's what they have holding up the bison slabs above their heads, the concrete floors. You're sitting watching TV on your couch and you've got acro props to either side of you to keep the ceiling from falling down. And that's where it's got to here. It's actually third world stuff, without exaggerating. And I would encourage anybody that wants to, if they go on Paddy Diver 4 Twitter account, they'll get all the accounts, they'll get all the videos they need to see in there. And it's actually, quite hard to believe that, a stone throw across the Irish Sea from yourselves, that this was actually happening in what's meant to be a modern country. It's just quite unbelievable. So you talked about the outer and inner leaves, the construction process in Ireland, particularly in the one-off houses in the rural areas and in the estates, is that it has been the concrete block for outer and inner leaf, but also all the partition walls inside the house as well for your hallways and your kitchens. It's still all concrete block. Government have again tried to give us an option of saying, well, we don't believe the inside walls will be a problem in years to come, so we'll give you a grant to help you towards replacing the outer leaf. But they're not prepared to give any grant or any guarantee on the inside walls. So when we have, and some of the homes have actually been remediated using that approved option from government, they're so-called housing engineers, and yet we can't get our houses insured because the insurance companies will say, okay, you've replaced your outer leaf, but you've got defective blocks in the rest of the house. And even though they haven't manifested themselves in a problem right now, we have no evidence to say that won't happen. And for that reason, they'll not insure the homes. So we have homes that have gone through a government-approved remediation scheme that can't be insured. The banks won't give you a mortgage against these homes for exactly the same reasons. and the market value has been reduced to site value. Our market is virtually stopped now in terms of buying and selling homes in these 6 affected counties in total.
A lot of people, when they buy a house, they're mortgaged up to the hilt. They don't have any spare cash. And when you're faced with that kind of thing, you're saying that the government's saying, we'll give you a percentage, but whatever you have to find, and you're saying that 100,000 euros still to find, it's just beyond people, isn't it? I mean, they are stuck. Yeah. If the government doesn't help them out from this situation, there is nobody else that's going to help them. They're going to be sitting in crumbling buildings for years to come, which they can't sell, they can't pay for. Just awful, and you say, no insurance either. That's it strikes me that we got a parallel here slightly with our situation with the cladding in England, where we've got all these buildings which are basically clad in flammable material, and people can't sell them, they can't insure them, they can't do anything, and they're faced with a bill for the repair. And again, we have a situation where the government said it's okay, this all this stuff's been approved, and then it turns out it hasn't. I think at some point there's a precedent. I know it's different because it's a different country, but there is there's some kind of synergy between those two cases, isn't there, really?
Government are aware of these shortfalls. They know they fell asleep at the wheel and they allowed this to happen. This is no natural occurring disaster. This is no earthquake. Yeah. This was negligence on somebody's part. And the one thing we know for sure, it was not negligence on the homeowner's part. They actually tried to go down that road at the start, and they looked to see was there any correlation between the mica and pyrite affected homes and self-builds. That was the first place they went. And they wanted to see, and I'm sure they were hoping to see, a strong correlation. But in actual fact, the building, the local authorities building in which this analysis was taking place is actually covered in mica itself, the local authority building, right? Yeah, our local hospital has it. Our libraries have it. Our community centres have it, and the large estates have it. The one-off houses have it. So there's absolutely no correlation. And much to their dismay, they couldn't pin it back on the contractor, because at the end of the day, some people said, well, how come the builder didn't know this? The builder can't know this. It's a number of years after we thought we were seeing settlement cracks. The extent of cracking, not just in one elevation of the house, but right round the 4 elevations of the house that you were seeing this, then we knew we weren't dealing with settlement cracks. Yeah. We didn't know what it was, but it ended up being, mica or pyrite, depending on which county you were in.
Have you got the governments here now? You're beginning to get some movement here. You said you were talking to them yesterday.
At least some of them, most days. And we're probably looking at about a 3.2 billion euro deal, right?
Yeah.
But that's over, 15, 20 years. We'll not turn this around in a year or two. Actually, one of our biggest problems, and I would encourage any forward-thinking construction company, there is a massive opportunity here. We've got about 7,000 homes. We have very, very few contractors, and we would absolutely love a proper competitive environment over here for homeowners, that they could go to options other than the local contractors. Right now, it's survival of the fittest, because you have got maybe 10 different families with their own individual one-off homes going to the one contractor, and the one contractor sitting with his arms folded going, well, I'll need, X amount a square foot. The next phone call, it's X plus 10, and on it goes. So we really, really are struggling to have good competitive contractors over here. And we're looking at likes of cooperatives where, say, for example, there was a construction company in the mainland prepared to come over here, that we would look at a co-op type thing, where we could maybe bunch 20, 30 houses together for that contractor and get a price for that, and see if we could make that attractive to them. So that was one of my key asks, I suppose, from this today, is that, anybody that's aware of anybody out there that may be of interest in any shape or form, you've got my details, Roger. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody that would be interested in pursuing that.
There's something really ironic about this situation, in as much as, half of London, at least half of London back in the day, was built by the Irish, and now you're telling me you can't find Irish builders. It's an insane situation, isn't it? Where are they all gone?
During the crash, that we had probably around 2008, 2009, a lot of them headed to the States, a lot of them headed to Australia,
oh, goodness,
we lost a lot of tradespeople A lot of
Goodness.
tradespeople. Yeah.
I had no idea it was that critical a thing. That I know you had this, like you say, the Celtic Tiger, this fantastic boom, and everything was really busy. And then obviously the crash came, and all those people out of work. I suppose they just have to go. They've got to go somewhere, haven't they?
You have schemes now here, Roger, encouraging young lads to get involved in apprenticeships and all that, which is fine. But you'll maybe cash that in 5, 6, 7 years time. But now we've got a problem beyond our biggest nightmare, in terms of how do we go address this. Government, do have options. They could come in with like a housing agency approach and centralise that and take this on a turnkey basis on behalf of homeowners. They're not prepared to do that. They've been reluctant to do that, even though they did it for Dublin. They're not prepared to do it in the rural areas. So there's a lot of what we would see as blatant discrimination, to be honest, between the rural areas and the capital itself. The grant, as poor as the grant is only available to principal homeowners as well. So you've got to give evidence that it's your principal home. So if you had a buy-to-let, for example, which a lot of guys did, particularly the tradesmen, during Celtic Tiger times, and they had a bit more cash about them. If they were living in an estate, they maybe bought another house in that estate and they rented that out. That was going to be, these guys are small time. They didn't have company pensions or anything like that. This was going to be their pension pot. That asset is now turned into a liability. They can't sell it, and they can't even get on the scheme to try and get it fixed because the government's hell-bent on not supporting anybody other than the principal private resident. So you have two problems there. You've got the landlord that is basically, he's screwed. He can do nothing. And then you've got the tenants that are living in that home. Where do they go? Because they can't apply as tenants and their landlord can't apply as a landlord. So where do they go? They're abandoned completely by the scheme. And the other sector is the holiday homes. These were ordinary people that saved and maybe visited a particular location for years and then saved up, bought their house and their holiday home, paid it off. Now, when they wanted to maybe cash that in as a pension, it's worthless, basically, So these people can't be left behind. And now, government are looking to get away the cheapest way they can and with as few houses eligible as they can, which is quite shameful.
It strikes me as immoral, actually, that you're trying to divide and rule, isn't it? It's like, let's see if we can separate these people off, give the people that own one home, some kind of SOP, and then abandon the others, you need a bit of solidarity there and try and stick together with it. But I take it that you've got a good substitute concrete, a mica-free concrete block to rebuild these houses with. You're not going to have to import those from somewhere, are you?
Right now, we don't have any guarantees or assurances that the blocks we're using today are okay. And as crazy as that sounds, while government have spent all their time and efforts trying to ensure that they minimise the exchequer expenditure to homeowners, they've left the gate open and the quarries continued to build these blocks. So we told them we formally wrote to them back in 2014 with evidence of what was happening here, and they ignored it. And as lately as August of last year, we had blocks with 15% mica tested.
Oh, 15%.
15% mica.
You're saying one is about where you should be.
Yeah, exactly.
So 15%. Mica. Well, they are guaranteed to crumble, aren't they? I mean, it's just a waste of time. It's like you're talking about Weetabix, and we must say that other breakfast cereal are available. But when you're talking about Weetabix, you're just putting something back here that is even worse.
A lot of people are now turning to timber frame builds because they just don't have the confidence, even today we don't have the confidence, So, one of the big things for us, we had what we called the 3 pillars. The first one is 100% redress. It should be fully compensated. The second thing is, if it's not a demolish and rebuild, there should be a 40-year state-backed guarantee standing over that entire property. Then the insurance companies will be prepared to insure, lenders will be prepared to lend, and the market value might have some chance of returning to normality. And the third thing is excluded homes. There should be no excluded homes. Should there be a buy-to-let? Should it be a holiday home? These were all equally bought and paid for. Nobody robbed banks for these. This was all hard-earned cash, tax paid, VAT paid, and and we were sold a pup, all because of light touch regulation. And that buck stops with the state, and they need to man up and they need to pay up. The fourth one in there has to be an inquiry into this. there has to be lessons learned from this. And this could, at the end of the day, we're all taxpayers too. We don't want to see our taxpayers' money going into this. We want to see them going into hospitals and schools and everything else. Yeah. If the first thing you're looking at in the evening is your home, which has deteriorated further from you left in the morning to go to your day's work. So that's how critical this stuff is at this stage. And there's mental health issues, Roger, that is piling up here as well, big time. And we've got kids affected. We've got kids at school, and they're in their playground to spend their time talking about mica and pyrite instead of their hopscotch and what they should be doing. So it's just really, really unacceptable that it's been allowed to drag on for 10 years.
The only thing that worries me about a public inquiry is that knowing what a money pit they are and how long they take, I'd be looking for the compensation before the public inquiry. Light touch regulations, that very phrase just brings a shudder to me. Just the idea of it, that we have regulations, be a bit like having traffic rules, like, you can do a bit of speeding here because we're all in a hurry, so instead of having a 30-mile-an-hour limit, you just let people do 60 miles an hour just because it suits you. It's crazy, isn't it? And if you've got regulations, you have to stand by them. As a taxpayer, as a citizen, you expect that to happen. You expect somebody to be accountable somewhere down the line. Can you just give people a link to what you've got in the way of a website and so on, so people can have a look at this situation and maybe give you some support?
For Twitter, I would encourage Paddy Diver 4. I think that's a great place to start, and you'll get the full story on there, and lots of useful commentary, lots of videos and pictures. We also have Mica Action Group itself. You'll get our Facebook page, and again, we're on Twitter there too. So certainly you'll get all the detail you want on there. And the final page I would talk to is 100% Redress, no less, Facebook page. Again, piles of videos in there, lots of comments, lots of homeowners telling their own stories in their own language, and it really sells the point well. So I would encourage them three in particular.
It's a nightmare situation, Michael, and I admire you for keeping going on it and keeping your chin up, as it were, because it's a very depressing situation for a lot of people out there. And I don't think we know enough about it in the UK. It's not something we've heard about so much, but I think that people will be looking at it and seeing, what you can do. But certainly we'll be following it, and I wish you luck with it.
And really, Roger, I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to come on here. Again, it gets the message out there. And again, on the contractors, you never know what comes out of that. It may be of interest to somebody over there.
Yeah.
But the coverage is really much appreciated, Roger, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, all the best to you. Thank you very much for coming on to Skill Builder and telling us your story. And as I say, I hope it has a happy ending somewhere soon, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.